There's a question that quietly follows many men into their 40s, especially those who have already been through marriage once. Can I do this again? Will it be different this time? What if I fail again? At first glance, these seem like emotional questions. Questions about love, compatibility, or hope. But they are not. They are structural questions. Because remarriage after 40 is not simply a continuation of romance. It is a reconstruction of life architecture. And this is where most people make their first and most critical mistake. They assume that remarriage operates under the same rules as first marriage. It does not. Marriage in your 20s or even early 30s is fundamentally about construction. Two individuals come together with relatively open futures, limited entanglements, and a shared sense of possibility. They build something new. But remarriage after 40 is different. It is not construction. It is integration. You are no longer building from an empty foundation. You are layering a new relationship onto an already established life, pre-existing financial structures, deeply ingrained behavioral patterns, emotional scars that have not fully healed, and often complex relational networks, children, ex-partners, obligations. This is not romance. This is systems engineering. That is why on this channel, I deliberately avoid romantic language. Statements like, love conquers all. If you're compatible, everything works out. These ideas are comforting but operationally useless. Because remarriage does not fail due to lack of love. It fails due to flawed structure. More precisely, remarriage is not a problem of emotion. It is a problem of design. And it is not a matter of willpower. It is a matter of training. Yet most people misunderstand this. When a second marriage fails or even begins to destabilize, people instinctively look outward. They were the problem. They didn't understand me. They were too sensitive. But when you analyze remarriage cases at scale, whether in clinical settings, counseling environments, or legal contexts, a striking pattern emerges. The person changes. The outcome does not. The partner is different, but the conflict pattern is identical. The marriage is new, but the breakdown mechanism feels strangely familiar. Why does this happen? Because human beings repeat what they do not understand. Unexamined patterns do not disappear. They replicate, often unconsciously. This is where an unexpected but powerful insight comes from the ancient Buddhist text, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It states, after death, one's path is determined by what one remains attached to. Now, this may sound metaphysical or even religious, but psychologically, it is extraordinarily precise. Because in life, just as in that teaching, we are governed by what we are attached to, what we fail to recognize, what we have not trained ourselves to control. And so we repeat, not because we want to, but because we are structured to. This is why the most important question in remarriage is not, do I love this person? It is, why did my previous marriage fail? If you avoid this question, remarriage becomes statistically dangerous. If you confront it directly, your probability of success increases dramatically. This is not theory. This is pattern analysis. This video and this framework is designed for 3 specific groups. First, men in their 40s considering remarriage. Second, those currently in a relationship but hesitating before commitment. Third, individuals already remarried who want to reduce recurring conflict. This is not dating advice. This is structural strategy. And if you approach remarriage without structure, 3 predictable errors occur. 1. You make decisions based purely on emotion. 2. You fail to analyze the root causes of past failure. 3. You ignore financial and responsibility architecture. When these 3 combine, conflict is not accidental. It is inevitable. But if you prepare differently, the entire trajectory changes. You need 3 foundational elements: self-analysis, behavioral training, structural design, especially financial. When these are in place, remarriage stops being an emotional gamble. It becomes a managed system. So, how do you actually do this? Let's break it down. Step 1, written failure analysis. Most people summarize their divorce like this: it was hard. That is not analysis. That is avoidance. You must document your previous marriage in detail, not digitally, but physically. Handwritten if possible, because writing slows cognition and reduces emotional escape. Minimum 3 to 5 pages. Divided into early stage problems, repeated conflicts, your specific words and actions, recurring criticisms from your partner, the final breakdown event. But here is the critical rule. Do not write, "They were the problem." Write, "What behaviors did I fail to control?" For example, dismissive tone, financial avoidance, withdrawal during conflict, emotional outbursts, concrete behaviors, not abstract blame. And at the end, you must answer one final question. What was the structural cause of this marriage's failure? Not emotionally, but structurally. For example, avoidant conflict system, financial opacity structure, power imbalance dynamic. Without this step, you are repeating blind. Step 2, third-party validation. Self-analysis is inherently biased. You need external calibration. This can include licensed therapists, couples counseling specialists, psychological counseling centers, court-affiliated mediation programs. The process should follow 3 rules. Minimum 5 sessions. Focus topic: why did my marriage fail? Request structured outputs. Pattern identification. O, attachment style analysis. Conflict response evaluation. And importantly, document everything. Session summaries. Professional observations. Your own reflections. This is not paperwork. This is pre-remarriage due diligence. Step 3, pattern mapping. Now you expand the analysis beyond marriage. List all relational contexts: romantic relationships, workplace dynamics, friendships. Then identify repetition, attraction to similar personality types, silence during conflict, avoidance of financial discussions, control tendencies under stress. Mark patterns that appear 3 or more times. That is your relational algorithm. If you do not identify it, you will rerun it. Step 4, behavioral protocol design. Once patterns are identified, you design counteractions, not intentions protocols. For example, silence during conflict, express within 24 hours. Financial avoidance, monthly financial review meeting. Anger escalation, 10-minute separation before response. Write them as declarative rules. I communicate within 24 hours of conflict. This is not philosophy. This is behavioral engineering. Remarriage is not about love. It is about operating a system. Step 5, emotional response training. This is the hardest phase because emotions are automatic, but responses are trainable. You begin with a 30-day emotional log. Trigger event, physical reaction, immediate thought, actual behavior. Then you implement delay mechanisms. Pause 5 minutes, deep breathing, change physical location. Finally, you simulate conflict. Role play with a therapist or trusted partner. Rehearse alternative responses. This is not therapy. This is training, like athletics. At this point, something fundamental shifts. Remarriage stops being a leap of faith and becomes a controlled system. Let me be absolutely clear. Remarriage is not romance. It is integration. It is not driven by emotion. It is governed by structure. If you skip these 5 steps, you are not entering a relationship. You are entering a probability curve, and the odds are not in your favor. But if you do this work rigorously, honestly, structurally, even complex remarriages can succeed because you are no longer reacting. You are designing. If this kind of analysis helps you think more clearly about relationships, not emotionally, but structurally, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing. It allows this channel to continue producing deeper, more rigorous content. Now, in the next section, we'll go even further. We'll examine how financial structures, not emotions, become the primary fault line in remarriage after 40, and why most couples misunderstand that entirely. Up to this point, we've established something critical. Remarriage is not driven by emotion. It is governed by structure, design, and training. But now we move into a deeper and far more uncomfortable layer of reality. Because even when people understand structure, even when they prepare, even when they genuinely care about each other, something still breaks down. And when it does, most people misdiagnose the problem. They say, we're having financial issues. We disagree about money, but that's not what's really happening. What you are witnessing is something much more fundamental, a collision of perceived fairness. An ancient Buddhist text, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, offers a striking insight. Loss strengthens attachment. Those who have lost cling more tightly. Now again, this may sound spiritual, but psychologically, it is exact. Because after loss, especially something as identity-shattering as divorce, people do not become neutral. They become attached. Attached to security, attached to control, attached to the fear of losing again. And this is where remarriage becomes structurally difficult. Because when two people enter a relationship, they are not just bringing love. They are bringing attachment systems shaped by loss. This leads us to a core principle. Financial conflict in remarriage is not about lack of love. It is about conflicting definitions of fairness. And here is the crucial part. Fairness is not objective. It is not determined by numbers. It is not determined by logic. It is constructed from subjective attachment. Two people can look at the same financial situation and arrive at completely different conclusions. This is reasonable. This is unfair. Not because one is right and the other is wrong, but because they are attached to different things. The same Buddhist text warns, what you cannot release will bind you again. This is not philosophy. This is operational truth in remarriage. If attachment is not examined, it will reappear as conflict, as suspicion, as resentment. That is why financial design in remarriage must begin before asset integration. Not with numbers, but with awareness. Before you merge accounts, you must clarify structure. At minimum, 4 elements must be explicitly defined. The scope of inheritance, responsibility for living expenses, long-term retirement strategy, boundaries of financial support for children from previous relationships. If these are not documented clearly, concretely, conflict will not disappear. It will simply disguise itself as emotion. And this is where I want to introduce one of the most overlooked psychological risks in remarriage. Compensatory spending. This is not just a financial habit. It is a psychological response. And to understand it properly, we return again to the same philosophical lens. Why do men in their 40s, after divorce, often split into 2 extremes, oversaving or overspending? Because divorce is not just the end of a relationship. It is the collapse of identity. For many men, identity is deeply tied to roles: provider, protector, stabilizer. When that role collapses, the mind reacts. The first reaction is extreme frugality. I will never fail again. I will never lose control again. This is not discipline. This is defensive psychology. It is an attempt to regain control through restriction. The second reaction is the opposite: excessive spending, lavish gifts, expensive dinners, luxury experiences. On the surface, it looks like generosity, but underneath, it is something else. Self-validation. I am still valuable. I am different from the past. I deserve to be chosen. And here is where it becomes dangerous, because in early remarriage, this behavior is often misinterpreted. The partner sees generosity, but the reality is anxiety. Early in the relationship, fear is stronger than love. I have to get this right. I cannot be abandoned again. I must prove myself. So the investment increases. Time, energy, money. But over time, reality re-enters. Ongoing living expenses, children from previous relationships, financial obligations to ex-partners, retirement pressure, and then a shift happens. A quiet but critical shift. The internal dialogue changes. Do I really have to keep doing this? At that moment, what once felt like generosity begins to feel like obligation. And that is where conflict begins. The ancient text explains that even after death, humans experience illusions shaped by their attachments, not external illusions, but projections created by the mind. The same applies here. After divorce, many men are not reacting to reality. They are reacting to internal projections. I am a failure. I was abandoned. These beliefs create behavioral distortions. Oversaving, overspending, two different behaviors, same root. There are three underlying mechanisms. First, attachment to failure. Second, fear-generated illusion. Third, repetition of unresolved patterns. If financial conflict existed in the previous marriage and the root cause is not understood, it will repeat, just in a different form. Control through restriction or control through spending. Both are expressions of the same attachment. And this is why it is particularly dangerous in remarriage. Because remarriage is not simple. It is structurally dense. Children, assets, inheritance, future obligations. In this environment, financial behavior is not neutral. It is interpreted repeatedly. If patterns accumulate, the partner begins to see something else. This person is trying to control the relationship through money. And once that perception forms, trust begins to erode. So the most important question is not, how much are you spending? It is, why are you spending? Are you acting from love or from fear? Are you saving with intention or holding on out of anxiety? The same text gives us a final insight. The moment you recognize an illusion as illusion, it loses its power. This is the turning point, because what remarriage requires most is not financial intelligence. It is self-awareness. Oversaving and overspending are not opposites. They are reflections of the same root. Fear of failure. If that fear remains unconscious, remarriage does not become a new beginning. It becomes a repetition. So what is the solution? Not avoidance, not emotional reassurance, but structure. Clear, explicit, documented structure. Because in remarriage, unwritten agreements are not agreements. Let's be precise. There are 5 non-negotiable structural elements. 1. Full disclosure of premarital assets. 2. Clear separation between joint and individual assets. 3. Separation of child-related expenses and household expenses. 4. Pre-agreed inheritance structure. 5. Explicit rules around debt responsibility. If these are not defined, conflict is not a possibility. It is a trajectory. And underneath all of this lies a deeper truth. Money in remarriage is not just money. It is symbolic. It represents control. It represents recognition. It represents safety. It represents the future. So when couples argue about money, they are not arguing about numbers. They are negotiating. Who decides? Who is valued? Who is secure? Whose future is protected? This is why successful remarriage is not built on deeper love. It is built on clearer structure. Love may begin the relationship, but structure sustains it. And this brings us back to where we began. Remarriage is not about finding a better partner. It is about becoming a more structured individual. Because ultimately, you do not repeat relationships. You repeat patterns. If this perspective helps you see relationships more clearly, not emotionally, but structurally, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing. In the next part, we will go even deeper. We will break down 4 real-world remarriage structures and analyze exactly how fairness conflicts emerge in each case. Because understanding structure is not enough. You must also recognize how it fails. I'll see you in the next lecture.